HDSI's quarterly alumni spotlight and networking mixer. We're excited to have so many participants today. We had a lot of people register, several HDSI alumni, so super excited to get the conversations between students and alumni going. We hope this will be time well spent and that you'll come back for more networking in the future. My name is Kelly Jensen, and I am the Career Advisor and Alumni Outreach Specialist for HDSI. So I have the pleasure of working closely with both our students and alumni. And I've developed this series in response to the increasing interest from both students and alumni who want more opportunities to connect, network, and learn from each other. These mixers will always feature HDSI alumni, but students and alumni from all majors are welcome to attend, as are faculty, staff, and industry professionals, because we understand that a diverse group will have more to offer. HDSI Spotlight events alternate between virtual and in-person so that we can provide the space for alumni who are not local to San Diego, as well as opportunities to meet face-to-face, which can often be more conducive to organic conversations. Through this series, you'll have opportunities to meet some incredible professionals in the field of data science who will discuss related topics, but also share their unique stories, challenges, and tips for success. Today's event will start with a presentation by our featured guest spotlight, Stephanie Moore, from the inaugural class of 2020, followed by time for brief discussion and Q&A. Then you'll meet 3 interesting and knowledgeable breakout session leaders who, along with Stephanie, will be facilitating today's networking rooms for the last 30 minutes or so of today's program. Please be a proactive participant. Ask questions, give insights, share your contact information, and be sure to have your camera on, especially during the networking portion. You're welcome to ask questions, make comments, and have conversations in the chat throughout the event. And our networking facilitators will do their best to respond to them. I encourage you to start, each of you, by introducing yourself in the chat and sharing your major, year or date of graduation, place of employment, if that's applicable, or any other interesting tidbits you'd like to add. If you're alumni, you may even want to rename yourself in Zoom so others are able to identify you more easily. Totally up to you. Now, I'd like to turn it over to our guest of honor, Stephanie Moore.
Thanks so much, Kelly. I'll begin first by sharing my screen. People who have done things virtually know the drill, but let me know when you guys can see the college to career link. Awesome. I'm getting all thumbs up. Well, as Kelly mentioned, my name is Stephanie Moore, and if you don't know a little bit about me, I graduated in 2020, as Kelly mentioned, the inaugural class, but I'll go ahead and get into actually some details about me in my presentation before diving into the importance of networking in today's digital world, which is the topic that I wanted to discuss with you guys today. So a little bit more background about me. I was, of course, a data science major, but during school, I was also on the women's basketball team and was a part of the data science student representatives. In my career, I have done some internships with the sports performance department at UCSD, also interned with a company called FlashPub, and then moved into a data scientist and technical writer with the data standard, as well as being a technical advisor for a startup, DecisionAI. And then my most recent experience, I worked for about 2 years for Deloitte before moving into my current position with Dexcom as a data scientist. Now, don't worry, I'll get into some more details about that. But again, just wanted to give you guys some fun background. I also have hobbies. Hobbies are really important, especially during school and even into the industry. But I love salsa and bachata dancing. I recently took up jujitsu and lifting. Creatively, I really enjoy reading and painting. Also like video games, and I'm a full-time cat mom to 2 rascals. So Now that you guys know a little bit more about me, the rest of my presentation, I'll key in really on the positions that I've listed out here and what I've learned specifically in the eyes of networking. So my post-grad career journey, what did that look like? First off, I started as an intern, I mentioned, at FlashPub. What that company was, it's a company that allows for micro publications of research articles and gives people the opportunity to have peer-reviewed articles and making publishing faster overall. What exactly did I do at that job? Well, I helped code I helped with the code that tagged the articles by concept or idea to really help group things. And so this opportunity was one of my first tastes of this thing called networking. And I actually found this through the data science student advisory department because the startup FlashPub was actually working out of the basement building. And so this was kind of my first pre-COVID exposure to networking using the resources that I had as an HDSI member. Next, with the data standard, I was a data scientist and technical writer. Now, first off, what is the data standard? It's actually a virtual community, and I started this work in the midst of COVID. But it allows for data professionals to connect virtually through events, a podcast, as well as get involved with technical writing. Now, what I did at this job, I had three main responsibilities. The first one was to reach out to people on LinkedIn to try to get them to come and share their story on the podcast. I also conducted research on the uses and experience of machine learning in the industry. And I did do a little data science, so did some data ingestion and visualization. But what I really learned from this position was actually being able to connect with and learn from some of the top data professionals in the industry. I got to meet with people, all virtually, of course, like the VP of AI at Samsung, the VP of AI strategy at IBM, and data scientists from NASA. It was incredible. Now, how did I do this? Well, I learned about empathy and how to make genuine connections with people, and that reaching out to people first for general interest in their expertise is more effective than asking people for something. And I'll touch on this more later. Another thing I learned from this position is that first impressions matter. I did a lot of work of beefing up my LinkedIn with a professional headshot, adding more details on my work experience, and also creating a fun personal website. After all, this was the first thing that people were going to see when I reached out to them on LinkedIn. And I also worked really hard to sound and look professional during Zoom calls. This included, putting on a nice shirt, having good lighting, and even at one point, stacking my laptop up on some books and hanging a bedsheet in the background to make the background look more professional, and trying to hide my cluttered apartment. So I learned a lot of things from this position, and I really started to begin how to reach out to people and also leave a good first impression. Moving into my experience with Deloitte, there I was actually working under the government and public service sector and doing some consulting. So that is a whole can of worms, so to say. But what I did while I was there was worked on a variety of projects, including working with a data warehouse team for the company Covered California. I also worked on an analytics and modeling team for New Hampshire and got to do some great work on the opioid epidemic there. And then lastly, I also got to work on some internal use cases for Deloitte and some data science applications. So the exposure to all those industries I just mentioned within the same company without having to go through the job hiring process, et cetera, was totally invaluable. But in order to get on those projects, I had to learn how to promote myself or advocate for myself and network within Deloitte with people whose projects I were interested in. And honestly, throughout my almost 2 years at Deloitte, I kept notes in my OneNote drive and ended up talking to almost 50 people. My OneDrive almost ran out of space, not really. But I reached out to these people, not just to learn about the project opportunities, but actually more importantly, to help me to learn about their career path in data science and to help me figure out what I want to do when I grow up. So these meetings really helped inform me, not just what I could do with data science, but it actually overall led me to discover my passion for data science, which laid in the intersection of health and technology with data science. And that really leads me into my current position with Dexcom. So specifically right now, I get to work in the research and development department. I work on what they call new applications and indications of the continuous glucose monitoring devices. And what I do on the day-to-day is I get to ingest and analyze our data before we send it over to our modeling team. And I'm also the team lead for data infrastructure. So I get to work with our team to improve data processes like storage, governance, and ensuring data quality. And from my current position, what I've learned since joining almost a year ago is that even if you're really happy with your job, that doesn't mean you start networking. It just might change a little bit. And so I'm actually regularly reaching out to people within Dexcom to learn more about what they do. This is not just to build the genuine connections like I mentioned earlier, but also to potentially leverage their knowledge and expertise within our company, and of course, vice versa. So all of these experiences that I've talked about, and of course, leave questions in the chat, I'm happy to get to later as well. But they really helped me understand and fine tune my networking approach that works in today's digital or hybrid age, so to say. And before I get into my networking approach, I'd like to play a little game and just involve the audience and make sure you guys are still awake. But I'd like to ask you guys, what do you use LinkedIn for? I've got a few boxes here, so feel free to annotate. I'm not sure, I hope people have options to annotate. But go ahead and post a star, a sticker somewhere in these boxes of what you guys use LinkedIn for. And I'll give you guys 15, 30 seconds. Awesome. Okay, I'm seeing networking. I'm seeing reading posts and articles. It is a social media, and applying to jobs. So this is awesome. I'll take a pause here and see if I can clear the annotation. Oh my gosh, we did it. Okay, so moving forward, thank you for being involved. Thank you for waking up. But moving forward, I'm really gonna, of course, talk about that networking aspect of things. But in case you didn't know, I wanted to bring to people's attention, there's lots of different things you can do with LinkedIn. I have so many posts in my saved, folder on LinkedIn that's like quick SQL tips that you don't know you'll need, or links to free courses on Udemy. Nobody put taking courses, but LinkedIn Learning, I think you potentially might have to pay for, but a lot of people post free courses. And of course, applying to jobs, it's a great search engine for that, and there's quick and easy apply. But moving forward, like I said, I'll focus a little bit more in, I'm annotating. Stop annotating. I'll focus a little bit more in on that networking aspect. So now that you've heard a little bit about what LinkedIn can do, about how I learned about networking in my different jobs, I want to take you through a real world example of my networking approach and how it actually got me an opportunity to work for a former Googler and an expert data scientist. So my approach follows three main steps. The first is finding people whose work interests you. Now, how can you do this? You can do this via LinkedIn. You might be able to find someone at an alumni mixer like this, or any other places on campus. There's lots of resources, but my example was actually through the job I mentioned, working with the data standard. We had someone on our podcast who worked for this company called DecisionAl. And it really sparked my interest, not just because I hadn't worked too much in the startup space, but also because they were working on a concept of not just applying your Python skills in machine learning, but also kind of creating a product. The whole product development side I had never really been into. So I was really interested in this. And so the next step that I decided to do is reach out. Now, of course, it's not always that simple. It can be really intimidating. What happens if people don't respond? When do you know if you should follow up? Am I, being too much of a bother? These are all great questions. And sometimes, people really are just too busy and, their inbox gets flooded. But today I'll try to share some strategies that might help you get a higher response rate and overall just make it as easy as possible for that person you're trying to reach out to. When you reach out over LinkedIn or email, you should try to include the following information: why you're reaching out, what specifically you're interested in or asking for, why you chose to reach out to them, and when you want to meet. So, all right, good start. What's an example of that? Well, I'm glad you guys all asked. So an example of what that might sound like or look like, why you're reaching out. You're interested in advice on, or you're asking for help on something, or you're just interested in learning more about their job. Now, what specifically you're asking for, this is really to help narrow down that focus of what you're hoping to get out of a conversation with them. You want to have a conversation about learning how to get started in an industry. You want to learn more about their career path to get to where they are. Then moving on to why you chose to reach out to them. This is important. This is why, your text in LinkedIn doesn't just look like you copy pasted it to everybody. It's really important that you chose specifically to reach out for them and you explain why. You're interested in their experience at X company, their experience with X skill set. People don't want to feel like they've just been copy and pasted, And then lastly, when you want to meet, are you free for a 15-minute phone call or Zoom call, and give your availability. As an even further extension, I actually made what's called a Calendly link, not sponsored or anything, but it basically just allows them to click on a link and book with you. And I can answer more questions on that later, but this may seem like a lot of information to put in a LinkedIn message, but it actually makes it easier for the person, because imagine on their end, not having much time in their day, you potentially as well, trying to go back and forth to get all of this information. And so actually having it all up front makes a one-time response actually be able to have a conversation with somebody. And so I'm hoping that you guys can take this and start to learn a little bit more about what reaching out might look like. And then lastly, as part of kind of my overall networking approach, is to keep in touch. So I think in general, we've talked a lot about this idea of a genuine connection. And so it's important that you also nurture that relationship. Nobody wants to, get a message just every time that somebody needs something, or, really put a lot of time into, helping somebody and sharing their career path, and then maybe never hearing from them. And so once you're able to get an informational interview with them, continue to interact with them, whether it's over email, LinkedIn message, even just engaging with their LinkedIn posts or commenting like, "Oh, awesome idea, Brad," or "So glad you were able to do this." And so I just have a little snippet here of proof that I actually do take my own advice. And I did continue to keep in touch with Dan Becker, who is the guy I worked with at DecisionAI. So I've talked a little bit about my experience, my networking approach, and there's honestly so many places I could have gone with this presentation. And Kelly, I'm sure, has lots more ideas for future events, but I just want to leave you with a few extra tips that I thought of. And so the first one being, use your free resources. I talked about, all the options that LinkedIn can do for you, but you also have a lot of resources through HDSI, even I would say way more than when I was going there. And, you've got resume tips, you actually have prompts for these, networking over LinkedIn. And so really use that. And the other thing is to use LinkedIn to your advantage. There's, advanced search options, probably a little bit easier on a computer. There's alumni networks. You can join the UCSD or HDSI Alumni network. Lots of different options for that. And 2 more tips, please bear with me, but do your research. So when you're trying to prepare for these informational interviews, it's really important that you study, so to say, the individual and potentially the companies that they work for. You want to come with questions. If you invite someone to an informational interview, you are leading that discussion. So it's kind of your job to really facilitate questions and where you want that to go. And then lastly, I'm sure many of you had heard this, but really nail your elevator pitch. First impressions are really important. The elevator pitch is sort of the tell me about yourself question. And this is not just reading from your resume. This is something that should be 20 seconds and kind of really catch someone's attention without giving them too much detail to where they'll get lost. But again, there's so many more tips that I could put, and there's so many more events like this where you guys will continue to learn. But I really just want to leave you guys with that. Networking in today's digital age can be really daunting, but remember, everyone was where you are at now at one point. And for starters, you guys all have me as a resource, and I'm sure all of the breakout leaders as well. So thank you all, and I'll leave it open for questions now and comments.
That was awesome, Stephanie. Such good advice. Lots of stuff that I share with students all the time. So thank you for reiterating all of that. Got some good questions coming in. How do you feel about LinkedIn Premium as compared to the free version?
Yes, I was trying to find my unmute button. I think that there's definitely benefits. I actually was able to get access to that through my work at the Data Standard, and was able to, use it to send a lot of messages to people. I think there might be a limit, especially if people's accounts are locked. I think that there's lots of options you can do before you actually have to pay for something, but it really does help you maybe access people who might be off limits and you can't message them. But I would definitely say exhaust all your free resources first, and then kind of maybe move on as well.
I agree with that, because the paid LinkedIn Premium is pretty expensive. And it has some good offerings, but I don't know that it's necessarily worth the cost if your employer's not going to pay for it. But yeah, so next question, are you involved with any professional organizations or formal networking?
Let's see, I don't know if this qualifies, but I am part of Women in STEM meetup group through the Meetup app. It's pretty good. I like going and meeting people in person, and also in a casual setting, you're not being super professional online. But I find a lot of events, whether it's professional events or creative art events on the Meetup app, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, there's so much out there. I belong to a couple of meetup groups too, and it's a really nice way to meet people that you share hobbies with and other interests, and who knows where it could lead through those people that you meet. So I think that's good advice. Next question, how do you think about work in a startup versus a bigger company?
Yeah, great question. I am thankful to have experience in both. I think that even within startups and even within bigger companies, your experience can be very different. One of the great things about startups is you can have a lot of different tasks, even though you're just under one specific job title. That can also be a negative. But working at a startup and working with intuitively a smaller group of people, you can have access to working directly with the CEO. The guy I worked with at Flash Club, it was him and, you know, a designer, and we were the three people working on the product. Similarly with DecisionAI. So getting to work directly with the CEO, CTO, you know, all-knowing person can be really beneficial. But in addition, on the flip side, to kind of a bigger organization, especially when I moved into Deloitte, which was kind of my first bigger non-startup job, there's a lot more structure, which again can be good and bad, but I really enjoyed the learning resources and the opportunity for mentorship in that as well. I was able to get access to a lot of courses through Coursera, as well as, like I mentioned, being able to network with like 50 plus people. You know, there weren't even 50 plus people at like my first few startup jobs. So there's definitely pros and cons. You can get, some of it depends on your working style too, whether you are go kind of person, or you kind of like things a little bit more methodical. So definitely pros and cons to both.
Thank you for sharing that. And if anybody has additional questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask as we go. This is for you. I think that was some really helpful information. Stephanie, I get that question a lot too from, well, not necessarily that question, but students that are very kind of focused on the big name companies, because that's kind of the sexy place to be. But there are a lot of opportunities with startups and smaller companies to gain a lot more experience than you may be able to get in a very specific role with a bigger company. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. What is your goal, and what do you want to learn, and what do you hope to achieve by working in, you know, various sizes of places, and what they have to offer. Next question here in the chat from Ryan. How do you go about spending time networking while also working full time? Was it difficult to find time with people you were trying to network with while you're working? And I guess that could also be a question while you're going to school.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'll use for this question networking and also job searching like synonymously. It can be really exhausting, especially as someone who considers himself an introverted extrovert. So generally I'm introverted, but I can turn on the sparkle when needed, so to say. But yeah, it can be really tough. You know, you're working a 9 to 5, or you're going to class, you know, 8 to 6, and then finding that, you know, time to actually, you know, reach out to people. And especially, like I said, if you're moving towards this more genuine connection, that is going to take a little bit more of your time. But I found that it's a little bit easier to maybe do a few, you know, a little bit each day. I remember specifically when applying to jobs, you know, my backlog of bookmarks in LinkedIn just totally got, you know, overwhelmed. I had, you know, 20, 30, and then sometimes the positions were closed, but just, you know, knock out a few at a time, or, you know, write down some people you want to reach out to and try to prioritize them. But yeah, it can be hard, and sometimes you have long days and you can't do much, but just trying to break it down and do a little at a time is the best advice I can give.
You moved into or from several companies over your career so far. Were there any specific times where you realized you should start job searching for a new opportunity, or do you constantly job search?
That's a good question. No, I do not constantly job search. It can be kind of exhausting, and also in general, I do try to live in the present. But I think sometimes, I think when you start a new job, you kind of have that sort of onboarding phase where you're just trying to kind of get up to speed about the actual work that you'll be doing, as well as any background information about the company or the job you might need. I think the times where I realized maybe I should want to start job searching aligned with a few different categories. The first one being career growth. Do I like the direction that my career is going in terms of the skills I'm learning, or the skills that I'll be able to learn? The second one would be, you know, work-life balance and kind of the people and the culture that you're working with. You can only tell so much about the team that you're interviewing with, virtually or in person, but sometimes working styles are just not compatible, or sometimes just there might be a change in management, and that type of stuff is you can't really plan for. And then lastly, I think talking about money is a little bit taboo, but that is definitely a factor. You do want to be paid, what you're worth, and, be able to make rent if you're living in San Diego. But mostly those first two, kind of career growth and work-life balance and culture, are pretty high up there.
Those are all the questions so far in the chat. Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, one just popped in. How do you choose what kind of projects to work on before having a full-time job? How to show off your skills by integrating them into your project?
That's a great question, especially because I feel as if so many people's advice for when you don't have experience for the job you want to do is to do projects. One of the approaches you can take is look at the types of jobs that you are interested in applying for, or that you're interested in eventually having, and see what type of skills that they require that maybe you might be lacking, or that you just don't have a project to show you can do. One example of this is if they're asking you for experience with a certain type of software, and it happens to be open source, you can hop on that. Or maybe a specific type of data that people work with. So for example, at Dexcom, everything is, time series. We're looking at data values collected over time, which I hadn't really done before. I'd kind of done more stationary. This was the information at this time. Let's do some analysis on it. So I did some work to kind of think about some of the ways that type of data might be different. So going back to your question, how did you choose what kind of projects to work on? I think it actually totally correlates to the jobs you're interested in, what type of skills that they're looking for.
Last question on here. You mentioned Coursera earlier. Do you think certifications play a significant role in acquiring a full-time job?
That is a great question. It depends on your employer. I think Coursera or Udemy or any of LinkedIn Learning. I don't think like getting the certification and having that title on LinkedIn necessarily makes you more appealing or checks off more boxes on employers' lists. But what I think the main takeaway is that you now have that skill and you now have that knowledge. And so I think that because you learned a skill and you learned knowledge from that will play a role. You may be able to apply those to projects to display that skill set, but actually having like something listed on your LinkedIn or your resume, just like the name of your school, so to say, sometimes it can matter to certain companies, but sometimes not as much. I think more importantly is how you apply what you've learned.
That is great information. I would also recommend reading through job descriptions, in reference to the question about what kinds of projects to do and courses to take. If you're looking to go in a certain direction, look at job descriptions and see what the qualifications are. That's going to be a good way to figure out what qualifications you have and what maybe you're lacking that you could strengthen yourself in so that you are more prepared to go in the direction that you want to go. We'll do one more question and then we will introduce our other breakout leaders. So final question here, how do you prepare for technical interviews in data science? And this is a loaded question. And furthermore, how could you promote yourself in these interviews?
Yeah, Ethan, great question. I think technical interviews can be a little scary sometimes, especially if you're, more comfortable just kind of with that interpersonal skill set. But as an example of how I've prepared for technical interviews and also what people might look for being on the other side as an interviewer at times. Sometimes for these, they might give you general topics that you should know, which is helpful, but other times you really have to look at the job description. If they're interested in probabilistic modeling, pull up your school notes on that, or take a quick refresher. Even for my interview with Dexcom, I learned SQL in school, but I hadn't been applying it in my past jobs. So it kind of took like a quick SQL boot camp, and actually was able to get some questions on that. But I think it's important that not only in these technical interviews can you do the pseudocode or write it out, but you also think about the examples of what specifically is in the job description that you have done. So you can kind of say, you can maybe answer a question and be like, this was just like XYZ that I've done, and that can really add and promote yourself. Also, one more thing, being on the other side of it and being an interviewer at times, there will be questions that they ask that they don't expect you to know, or they don't expect you to maybe know to the completeness. And sometimes what interviewers are actually looking at is how you approach the problem, or how you approach a problem that you might not have the answer to, because that actually happens quite a lot in industry. And if you are someone who they care about how you are approaching the problem and the way that you think about it, because that tells them a little bit more about how you might fit into their team. And also, sometimes you might get questions in an interview, how do you handle failure? Or how do you, handle a problem that you don't know? And that is kind of a way for them to directly see that. So if you don't know 100% of the questions in a technical interview, don't be discouraged, and feel free to talk through your strategy, even if you don't know the answer. Well, I think I would do this. I can't remember the exact syntax, but this is the approach I would take. But great question.
Very good question. I know we always have students curious to know more about the technical interviews. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Stephanie, for sharing your overall story and offering such great insights for the group tonight. So now it's time to meet our networking breakout leaders, who each come from unique backgrounds and will help in facilitating discussions in each of the breakout rooms. So first, I would like to introduce Myra Hayter, who is a previous alumni spotlight, and she is from the class of HDSI class of 2021. Myra, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out. My name is Myra. As Kelly mentioned, I graduated from HDSI in 2021. And being in a general data science degree, you can really apply it to whatever you want. And I chose to go into the biotech industry. So I interned at biotech company Alumni, which is right next door to UC San Diego, as a supply chain data science intern. And then after graduating, I joined Thermo Fisher's first cohort of their data science leadership development program. So that is a 2-year rotational program. So I was with the life science group for 1 year, and then I've been with the clinical research group for 1 year, working on really neat problems, trying to apply data science to streamline clinical trials. So that's where I'm at now, and I look forward to learning more about your data science interests and how everything's going in school. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Next, we will introduce Bradley Wojtek, one of our favorite professors at UCSD.
Hey everybody, my name is Grad Wojtek. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm on sabbatical still for another couple months. I will be back to teaching, and I'll be back around again much more often starting in the fall. Going back to teaching, I think I'm teaching COGS 9 in the fall again. So I know a lot of you have already taken that almost certainly. And I think in the winter I'm teaching COGS 138, which is a new data science approaches to neuroscience class, and also a cognitive, like careers in cognitive and data science seminar. So a little bit more relevant to this. I don't think it has a number yet. It's pretty new. But if you don't know me, I'm a professor in cognitive science and data science. And I've been around since before the beginning of the data science major and the institute and everything like that. So it's pretty cool to be here with alumni who have gone through the whole thing and come out the other end, hopefully for the better. Good to see you all.
Excellent. Thanks, Brad. And finally, we have Bianca Portal-Truitt, Associate Director for Engineering in the Main Campus Career Center.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I work at UCSD these days in the Career Center, focusing on supporting students who are interested in engineering and kind of adjacent majors. And I've also been in kind of STEM related career services for going on 6 years now. Before UCSD, worked for SDSU for their College of Engineering, doing career services there. And prior to that, worked at a coding boot camp and did career services management there. And prior to all those things, I was a recruiter. So kind of bring that lens of reviewing resumes and doing initial recruiter screens of candidates and such. So I hope to be able to cover in our breakout sessions a little bit about career strategy. If you're someone who maybe feels like, hey, I've been applying to a lot of things, I'm not really hearing back, and you want to talk about what your approach has been and maybe some strategies that could ramp up your response rate, I would love to talk a little bit about that or anything else. So good to meet y'all.
Sorry, Kelly, can I add one more thing? I forgot, since
Absolutely.
it's probably relevant to what we're doing here. So I have worked in industry in the past. I continue to do some consulting with some companies. I actually, prior to joining UCSD as faculty, I actually came to UCSD to recruit students. So I've even been on the recruiting student side at UCSD. And so I have some advice there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, I'm a little bit outside of industry in terms of when I worked in industry full-time. But I still do a fair amount of consulting, advising, investing, and so on. So.
Thank you all. And as you can see, we have some great experienced professionals here to chat it up with. And let's give them all a virtual round of applause for being here this evening. Leaders, we really appreciate your time and value your experience, advice, willingness to engage everyone. Now we're going to go ahead and open up the breakout room.